All right, today we're going to dive into something pretty radical. It's a framework for self-mastery called the Sovereign Protocol. And let's be clear, this isn't about gaining power over other people. It's about the total, radical reclamation of power over yourself.
So let me just ask you something right off the bat. Are you really in control? Are your choices actually your own? The protocol argues that most of us, we're not really living our lives. Instead, we're being lived by forces we barely notice. Biological urges, social programming, and that little ghost in the machine we call the ego.
The philosopher Baruch Spinoza had this perfect metaphor for this. He said, a rolling stone, if it could think, would believe it was choosing to roll, that it was all its own idea. Think about that for a second. That's a powerful image for our own lives, right? We feel free, but so often we're just being pushed along by the gravity of our biology and the momentum of our culture. So what's the way out? What's the antidote? Sovereignty, but probably not in the way you're thinking. This protocol defines it as a process of subtraction. It's not about adding more skills or life hacks or new beliefs. It's about stripping away all the illusions, the scripts, and the programming to finally find out what's really underneath. Okay, so how do you actually do this? Well, the path is broken down into two really clear phases. First, you have to deconstruct. This means finding and then dismantling all those invisible puppet strings that control how you react and what you desire. And only after you've done that can you move to phase two, reconstruction, where you build a new foundation for yourself, one that's truly independent. Let's start with that first part, deconstruction. The protocol calls this phase the 3 deaths. Now, I know that sounds incredibly intense, right? But these are psychological shifts. It's about letting go of these core illusions that keep us trapped. And these are the 3 illusions we have to dismantle. First, our social identity, the mask we wear for others. Second, our black and white good versus bad thinking. And finally, the big one, the sense of a fixed, separate self. Let's break down what each of these really means. Okay, the first death is seeing our social self for what it is, and this one can be tough to swallow. It's basically a survival mask built on what the protocol calls value exchange. The idea here is that a lot of our social bonds are fundamentally transactional. We're wired for what's called biological altruism. We help people who can help us back. It's a stark thought, but when that value exchange ends, the connection often just fades away. The second death is all about a massive shift in perspective. Instead of immediately jumping in and trying to solve every problem that comes your way, you learn to just observe it with detachment. This is such a powerful psychological tool because the simple act of watching a crisis without panicking actually changes its nature. You rob it of its power over you. And that brings us to the final and deepest death, the death of the ego, that constant narrator in your head that never shuts up. This is the leap from intellectually knowing something is true to actually becoming it, to living it. When that self gets out of the way, your actions can become effortless. This is the whole idea behind Wu Wei. When an athlete is just in the zone, they're not thinking, they're just doing. The action is happening through them. So, once you've gone through that deconstruction, once you've cleared away the old rubble, it's time to build. Phase 2 is all about constructing a fortress of sovereignty on this new, clear foundation. And you do it using what the protocol calls the 3 pillars. These are the 3 practical areas you have to master. First, knowledge, which is all about owning your own mind. Second is health, owning your body. And third is equity, owning your wealth. And what's so cool is you can see the parallel here. You go through the 3 deaths to clear the way for these 3 pillars of true ownership. Pillar number 1 is knowledge. The goal here is simple, mental clarity. You practice this through things like meditation and journaling, which build your metacognition. That's the ability to watch your thoughts without getting totally swept away by them. And in a world that is just drowning in digital noise designed to hijack your focus, owning your attention is the first most critical form of ownership. If you can't control what you pay attention to, you really don't control anything else. Let's move to pillar 2, health. It's pretty simple. You can't be sovereign in a body that's falling apart. The key practice here is something called hormesis. This is where you intentionally expose your body to controlled short-term stress, like cold showers or fasting. And the logic is brilliant. You are literally teaching your nervous system's automatic comfort reflex that you are in charge, not it. The third and final pillar is equity. This is about owning the actual means of your survival. On the digital side, this means using assets you truly control, like self-custody Bitcoin, and communication platforms that can't be censored, like Nostr.
And physically, it's about becoming more self-reliant with things like solar power or your own food security. The logic is just inescapable. If somebody else controls your money, your communication, and your energy, you can never, ever be truly sovereign. Okay, so we've got the big philosophy, the deaths, the pillars, but how does this actually work in the real world, moment to moment? Well, it all comes down to mastering one single crucial skill. And this is where a little neuroscience just blows the whole thing wide open. There was this famous study called the Libet experiment, and it showed that our brains often start to initiate an action hundreds of milliseconds before we're consciously aware of our decision to act. That means our impulses often bubble up from our unconscious. So if the impulse starts before we're even aware of it, where's our free will? Well, it lies right here, in what researchers call veto power, or sometimes free won't. It's that tiny window of time, that little gap, where your conscious mind can step in and say, nope, and override that unconscious urge. This is the exact moment where you cut the puppet strings. And this leads to a super practical technique called urge surfing. It's so simple. The next time a strong craving or emotion hits you, don't fight it, but also don't act on it. Instead, step 1, just observe it. Notice it as a physical sensation in your body. Step 2, don't do anything about it. And step 3, just wait. Watch that wave of feeling rise, crest, and then eventually fall all on its own. That tiny pause is the practice of sovereignty in action. So, what's the point of all this? What's the ultimate result of the deaths, the pillars, and this daily practice? It's the transformation into what the protocol calls the unhackable self. This table just lays out the shift so clearly. You go from seeing the world in black and white, good versus bad, to seeing it in terms of cause and effect. Instead of being impulsive and reactive, you become conscious and observed. But for me, the most powerful change is the definition of freedom. It's not just, I do what I want. It becomes, I understand why I act. You stop being a character trapped inside your own story, and you become the one watching the story unfold. So, how do you live in the world with this new mindset? You don't become a hermit. The protocol suggests a stance of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You engage with the world, you play the game, you understand the rules. But internally, you remain unattached to the outcomes. You play the game, but you never, ever forget that it is a game. And that leads to the final, most powerful takeaway of this entire thing. This internal detachment, this sovereignty, it leads to a state where the fear of loss, of status, of money, of what other people think, it just no longer has a grip on you. And when you no longer fear loss, you truly become unhackable.